Hi, welcome back to another episode of Algebra and Word, the video series on YouTube. We're continuing our discussion on factoring of polynomials, specifically factoring by grouping. So I have two problems on the board. These are two problems that are involving four-term polynomial expressions. And we're going to be using the factoring by grouping method. I gave an overview of the steps of that and the reasons behind everything in the last video. But in this one, we have two more examples that I'm just going to demonstrate with you. So let's start at the top one. Now, we always want to go through a check of our four terms. Is it in descending order? And in this case, it is. Cubed, squared, 1, and the constant. And then we want to also look for a greatest common factor among all four terms. And is there one in this case? In this case, no. So we go to the next step, which is put parentheses around the first two terms and parentheses around the last two terms with the sign inside, like this. And always in between the parentheses, a plus. And you may not have much room, but you have to squeeze it in. Alright, so now we did that. Now, the next step is, let's come over here, and we want to look just in this group to see if there's a greatest common factor just in that group. And in this case, you should see 2x squared. So we're going to factor 2x squared out. Then in parentheses, we're going to write what remains after we divide 2x squared out of this, which would be 2x. And divide 2x squared out of this, which will then become 5. Okay, and now let's go to this group and ask ourselves if there's a greatest common factor among these terms, and there's not. So we're just going to rewrite it as it is. Okay. The next step is, and we're almost done, is to look at what we have and look for and try to identify, if anything stands out, a common binomial factor. That's the last greatest common factor. And if you find it, which is this and this, factor that out to the front. So, like this. 2x plus 5. This is the greatest common factor. Write another set of binomial parentheses, and we have to figure out what goes inside. And it's easy. The first term is this. That goes here. 2x squared. And if we look here, is there a factor or a coefficient in front of this factor? There's not, so because of that, we have to write 1 because 1 is the unwritten coefficient. 1. Always 1. If this is just alone, always remember to put 1 in that parentheses. So that finishes the top problem. This four-term polynomial factors into these two binomial factors by factoring by grouping. Okay, so now let's go to the next one. And I purposely chose this one because it's going to be a little more complicated and it's going to test us on all the possible steps. So remember, the first step to always ask is it in descending order where the exponents go down from left to right? And if you look, it's not. Now, does that mean necessarily that if you did the parentheses around the first two terms and the last two terms, it won't work? Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't work. I'd rather you not take the chances, though. I'd rather you always be in the habit of putting them in descending order if and whenever possible. So let's rearrange it into descending order. 6x cubed is already the first, so let's just rewrite that. The next would be 3x squared. The next would be minus 10x, and I'm going to do this for a reason. And minus 5 is the last term. Okay, so now we're in descending order. Now, before we do grouping, is there a greatest common factor among all four terms? And if we look through, no, there's not. So then that brings us to the next step, which is parentheses around the first two terms and parentheses around the last two terms with the sign inside. And you're going to see the reason why that matters in this example. And always plus between. Always plus between. Okay, so now we go back to the left group only, and we want to look for a greatest common factor just among the left group. And is there one? How about 3x squared? So let's come down and write 3x squared. And now put a set of parentheses and write what's left after we divide the greatest common factor out of the first term, which would leave us with 2x. and then the greatest common factor divided by this term, which would leave us with 1. Okay, so we finished this group. Now let's write plus, and now let's come to this group and ask ourselves the same question. Is there a greatest common factor just among this group? Now, at first glance you may say, yes, 5. And that's true. But one thing to point out about these is, whenever you have negative signs in both terms of the second group, always factor the negative sign out with it, okay? And another good rule of thumb is, this is probably a better rule of thumb, if the leading term of one of these groups has a negative sign, always factor negative out with the greatest common factor. So therefore, we're going to factor out, in this case, negative 5. And now let's write what's left. Negative 10x divided by negative 5 is positive 2x. And negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1. And now, if you're looking at the problem, you may realize the significance of that. Now, it brought us to the point where we have the same common binomial factor. That's going to be our last greatest common factor, which we'll factor out. I'm going to do that over, let's go below, and we're going to write the greatest common factor binomial 2x plus 1. And then another set of parentheses, and then whatever's left. This term will go here, 3x squared, and this term here, minus 5. And that's done. So there we go. 2 good examples of learning factoring by grouping of a 4 polynomial expression. So anyway, I will be posting other videos related to this, and keep in mind you will use the factoring by grouping method when you do the AC grouping method as a way to factor and solve trinomial equations and quadratic equations, which I will dedicate just to another video. So thanks for watching, and I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please give a thumbs up. Please leave any feedback in the comment section. Please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the little bell symbol so that you can be alerted when new videos come out as soon as they're released. And also, keep an eye out for other content on Facebook and Instagram. And I'll see you in the next video.